What is the best diet? So in today's video, I'll be discussing all the different types of eating strategies that I've used throughout my journey. And I haven't tried them all, but I basically decided I wanted to share all of them and some of the pros and cons with the different approaches. So for these last few years, I've tried many different methods, and hopefully guys can find some gems and maybe learn something new. So basically, when I started out my weight loss journey, I took a very simple and straightforward approach. So I decided to cut out soda and taking walks, and obviously taking walks is not very diet related, but I just feel like I wanted to include everything. So there are some things that are not only going to be related to nutrition, but as I started taking walks and cutting out soda from my diet, I experienced quite the benefits from doing that. So after a couple of months, I think it was 6 or 8, I had lost about 40 pounds taking walks and cutting out soda. So I started feeling better about myself. I started having more confidence. I just overall my quality of life started feeling better, and for the first time in many years, I started feeling a little bit hopeful about my situation, because it felt like things were going in the right direction. And yeah, so some of the pros with that is that it's very simple. Pretty much anyone can do it. It doesn't cost anything. Rather, you'll save some money because you're not drinking soda anymore. And the problem with this strategy is that it's not very easy to adopt. It's not easy to adjust how much calories we're burning without actually increasing the walks, and that's not going to be possible for everyone. And that was actually one of the problems that I ran into. So this helped me lose 40 pounds, but I had to lose 93 pounds, so I wasn't really at my goal when I started plateauing with this method. And what basically got me started getting results again was that one of my then coworkers put me on a meal plan and a gym training program. So this was very nice because it was extremely simple to follow. It brought me a lot of results, and I actually got to my goal weight following this program. However, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone for a few different reasons, but I'll start with the pros of this strategy. And it's very simple to follow a meal plan. It's basically brain dead. So what I did for every single day was that I was eating the same thing every single day, with the exception of that I had one weekly cheat meal. So I would usually have some type of burger, pizza, anything like that. And other than that, for every single day, I woke up and I had oatmeal porridge, a protein shake. My first snack was a protein shake. My lunch was minced meat and rice. And then I had another snack, which was surprisingly a protein shake. And my dinner was chicken, rice, and broccoli. And that was what I was eating every single day for 7 months, with the exception of that weekly cheat meal that I mentioned. And like I said, I got results. I got down to my goal week, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone because I was pretty close to developing an eating disorder eating this way. And what I hate so much about having cheat meals and what I stopped doing them is that it promotes a very unhealthy relationship with food. So we basically label these foods as good or bad, and meaning that what I was eating every day was the good food, and then I would have my cheat meal that is the bad food. And I think it's a terrible way to label food as good or bad. Of course, we should mainly eat whole foods that makes us feel good and bring us closer towards our goals, but if you're having some cake or a pizza at a birthday party, I feel like that can actually do more good than harm in the long run, especially if you're the type of person that's able to enjoy that without having any anxiety or feeling like you messed up. And if you're on a meal plan, it doesn't set you up for those events. It doesn't set up you for success to dealing with them in a good way. So if you're having two social happenings in 1 week, you utilized your cheat meal for the first one, and what do you do when the second one comes around? Like, it's not really a good strategy to succeed in the long term, in my opinion. So that is why I stopped doing that. But like I said, I'm very grateful that I had the experience and that it actually brought me towards my goal. And obviously the gym part was a huge aspect in that as well, because I was replacing some of the fat with muscle. But it was mainly the meal plan driving the results, because nutrition is always going to be deciding the calorie intake. Like when we're going to the gym, we might be lucky if we're burning like 300, 400 calories in a session, so that is going to be a very small amount, and the vast majority of your deficit is going to come from the calorie deficit we create from food. So what I moved on to after that was basically counting calories, and counting calories is a very simple and straightforward way to lose body fat. And why I actually counted calories even after I had successfully lost the weight was that I was doing these bulk and cut cycles. And what that means was that I was basically going through phases where I was intentionally eating too much food to put myself in the best conditions to put on muscle mass. But one of the downsides of going on a bulk is that we will have a small amount of fat gain. So what usually happens is that as our weight starts going up, we're building muscle. We also have to like go back to dieting again to get rid of some of that excess body fat that we accumulated. So that's why I started counting calories. Still after I was down to my healthy weight, and even now that I'm maintaining my health weight, I'm still counting calories mainly because I actually find it quite enjoyable. And obviously that's what most of my clients are doing, so I want to be able to relate to them and walk the talk, and maybe in the future I'll try a slightly different method, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, some of the pros with calorie counting is basically that it's pretty non-emotional, to be honest, because if you're eating 1000 calories each day, you can't really lie about that as long as you're logging everything perfectly. So if you have some way to like follow up how you're doing, you're going to see. So for example, me right now, my main intention is to lose a little bit of weight, but I haven't been losing lately simply because I haven't been sticking to my calorie goal. So my calorie goal right now is 2100, and the last week it was 2222. And the main reason why I lowered this was that's kind of how I like to punish myself actually, because if I'm being too nice to myself, I'm not going to stick to it, and that's basically what happened. So I had a pretty reasonable deficit for quite some time, and I wasn't sticking to that. So I would still probably lose weight if I was able to stick to it. So what I basically did was that I reduced my calories even further. So that's basically my way of punishing myself because I haven't been sticking to it, and that's not the best way to go about it, but that's how I work as a person. And I've been trying to lose weight for about 3 weeks now, and the only reason to why I haven't been losing weight is that I eat too much on some days. So that's basically how I work personally. And yeah, so kind of lost track of what I was talking about the pros. Okay, so calorie counting is basically a very non-emotional way, because if I was eating according to my goal, I would be losing weight, but I wasn't doing that. So it's a very straightforward approach to say, okay, Matthias, you're not paying your dues right now, so you're not getting the results. And that is basically what calorie counting allows us to do. And when we combine that with our body weight and pictures, we have all these data points that are pointing in either direction. And when they wasn't pointing in the fat loss direction for me personally, I had to take actions. So that's basically what I think about calorie counting. And some of the downsides with calorie counting is that some people find it very tedious. They feel like it takes a lot of time, and I totally get that. But at the same time, if you're the person that's not seeing the results that you're wanting to right now, like, is that really the end of the world that you have to weigh your food and put them in MyFitnessPal? I think I spend about 15 to 20 minutes each day doing that, so it's obviously worth it in my opinion, but each to their own. So what I moved on to after the calorie counting was basically flexible dieting. And flexible dieting and calorie counting are very similar, but what flexible dieting is basically that we have a protein goal, we have a carbohydrate goal, and we have a fat goal. And the idea with flexible dieting is that you can eat whatever the hell you want as long as you reach these goals. So it's a very flexible strategy. I'm quite a fan of it, simply because when we're taking this very flexible approach to dieting, for me personally, I actually started binging less. I started having less fast food, so that's brought me better results. I started feeling better about myself, and yeah, I very much like the variety. So I'm a person that I'm pretty static in my terms of eating. So what I will usually do is that I will be eating the same things over and over. But when I'm doing flexible dieting, it's very convenient because then I know every single day that what I'm eating lines up towards my goals. And if I want to make adjustments, I can do that. So I feel like it's a very nice strategy for me because I don't feel deprived, but at the same time I can just eat the dull and regular things that I do all the time because yeah, I just find it very convenient, and then it lines up so I know exactly what I'll be eating. I know that it will be bringing me towards those macronutrient goals. So I think that's awesome, and one of the downsides with flexible dieting is basically that you have to, just as when it comes to calorie counting, you have to like weigh your food, you have to log it into MyFitnessPal, you have to make sure that the meals you're preparing or the groceries that you have at home lines up with your actual goals, because otherwise you will miss them. And one thing that I really like when I'm doing flexible dieting is that to keep carbohydrate intake slightly higher on training days and fat intake slightly higher on training days. So basically on training days, slightly higher carbohydrate, fat intake slightly lower on training days, and just the reverse on rest days. So on rest days we want fat slightly higher, carbohydrates slightly lower. And what that is going to do is that you have a lot of more carbohydrates to fuel your training sessions, which is going to increase your performance and your recovery, which is awesome. And on the rest days you will have slightly higher fat intake, and for most people they find more fat more satiating than carbohydrates, so there is a pretty nice benefit to that. And I don't really have a name, or I was supposed to touch on intermittent fasting before that. So one thing that I've been doing, and we can basically combine it with every single method that I've spoken on so far, and that is basically intermittent fasting, and more closely something I call 16, or something that's called 16/8. And what 16/8 implies is basically that I have an 8-hour feeding window, I have a 16-hour fasting window. So what that means is that I usually have my first meal at 12 o'clock, and then I have a final meal at 8 o'clock in the evening. So that is the 8-hour feeding window that I'm using. I'm doing 2 meals per day right now. I find that's very enjoyable. And one of the many benefits for intermittent fasting is that our hormones pretty quickly adapt to this new pattern of eating. So you won't be hungry in the morning. So back when I was eating breakfast, I would always be starving after I woke up because my body was used to getting food at that point. But once I started delaying my first meal to 12 o'clock, that was pretty annoying the first few days. But once my body and hormones had adapted to that, they started creating that hunger response at 12 o'clock instead of after waking up. So what that allows me to do is that I have a few hours after waking up where I don't have to worry about food, and I can focus on being productive, and I think that's extremely liberating. And I've been doing it for multiple years now, and I find it very enjoyable. So some of the downsides with that is that obviously you're restricted to this eating pattern, and it's also going to take a couple of days or even weeks before you get used to it. So you might have to suffer through those first days to reap the benefits. And you should avoid intermittent fasting if you're pregnant. I can't recall exactly what it is, but it's it's something regarding the hormones that you definitely want to avoid if you're pregnant. And what I'm doing right now, I'm not really sure what to call it, but we could call it awareness eating, I guess. But what I'm doing right now is that I'm basically doing flexible dieting, but I'm basically taking it to the next level in the sense that I'm quite focused on how the foods are actually making me feel. So, for example, I haven't been drinking alcohol in more than 1 year now, and that doesn't mean that I recommend that to everyone, but it simply comes down to that I don't feel that great when I drink alcohol. Like, yeah, sure, I've had a lot of enjoyable times drinking and stuff like that, but I just feel like completely exhausted the day after. I don't think it's worth it at all. And once I started tracking my heart rate variability and I saw what alcohol was doing to that, it was quite a no-brainer for me to cut that out completely. So I'm very intentional what I'm eating right now. I try to keep track of how it makes me feel. So if there's certain food that causes me to bloat or gas, I tend to avoid that. And for example, something that I really like is casein protein powder. And the problem with that is that doesn't go well with me. So I will feel bloated. I will have a lot of protein farts, which is disgusting. So that is basically what my eating has evolved to as of lately. So not really a super defined strategy, so to speak, but yeah, mainly trying to stick to those whole foods that make me feel great, and probably going to experience. I'm going to experience with the vegan diet, plant-based diet is probably a better word. Yeah. So that is something I'm going to be experiencing with the next year, and I look forward to keep you guys posted on that. Take care.